Welcome, welcome, welcome. You are witnessing, you are watching, most of all, you are listening to Humanity in the Headlines. I am joined, and before I tell you I am Atiba Buchanan, your host, and I am joined and flanked by my main man, my partner, my brother from another mother, my pal, Mr. David Seaton. How are you, sir?
Wondering what's going on with weather in Chicago this week. Dropped 25 degrees in like 24 hours.
Yeah, that's Chicago. All right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you are right. Now that I think about it.
Like you have to, there are a lot of times you have to dress for the day. I oftentimes leave early at like 4:30 in the morning. I got on my heat in the car, a coat, and by noon I got on my air conditioning at home, and then at 10 o'clock at the crib. Like what is this?
I don't remember weather being this
volatile
when we were coming up.
Yeah.
Remember the old saying, April showers bring May flowers?
Yep.
It was snowing in April, right? Anybody out there who remembers the weather in this April, Go ahead. Shout out to Derek Rogers checking us out today. What's going on, man?
Absolutely.
On Facebook Live.
We want to thank everyone listening today on intellectualradio.com. If you're using YouTube to watch us, if you are listening or watching us on Facebook Live, we thank you so much. We definitely want you to participate today. We've got a great show coming up, a lot of great content, and a lot of things that we're talking about that are definitely important. And we love your participation and your comments. Feel free to comment on Facebook Live or ask questions. We'll be happy to answer them live and on the air, best of our ability. And we definitely want it to be just you and us today. So on Humanity in the Headlines. So we are ready to get this started. Dave, what are we talking about today?
We are going to talk about Roseanne Barr.
Absolutely.
I'm going to throw a little Samantha Bee in there for those of you who have been paying attention to that story. But we definitely want to talk about Roseanne Barr.
Because, it cuts both ways.
The other, both. What about the other? What about?
Right.
What about?
The whataboutisms, we love it. Cuts both ways. Both sides do it.
It's
which
amazing.
Is fairly true, but people misapply it so much.
Yeah, but what's frustrating for me when I follow this story and stories like this, for the most part, people on the right tend to be more religious. They tend to be more Christian in this country. Anybody out there who's watching us on Facebook Live, comment on this if you have an opinion. But if you go to church, I'm someone who grew up in the church. And when you go to church, there is no what about. It is either you are right or you are wrong. Either you are doing what God told you to do, either you are doing what thus saith the Lord, or you are a sinner, period. Ain't no, you're talking about whomever in the Bible and you say, well, what about? No. It's you are right or you are wrong. Even more recently, in the case of Bill Clinton and his indiscretions while he was president, the same religious right, their opinion about him was incontrovertible. They were, hey, he lacks character. He lacks morality. He should not be our president. And it is amazing to see how that side has morphed into this moral. Every argument has this moral relativism. Now, whether you're talking about Roseanne or whether we're talking about Trump or whether we're just talking about issues in general. And so again, the left is not, everyone has some degree of hypocrisy, but the left is not nearly as hypocritical as the right in its present iteration.
Absolutely. We're going to break that down in just a few minutes. I'm just reserving my comments for that. But yeah, very well said, my friend. And also we'll be discussing Puerto Rico. We just found out that
there were only like 64 people died, 70 people died.
Right. That's what they said at first.
That's what the Trump administration said.
Yes.
70 people.
64.
And
now we're up to 4,600.
70 times.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's where I got 70.
Yeah. Right.
It was 64 people who died, but it's actually 70 times.
So we got to.
You can't get that. Listen, while those of you watching and listening, just so you know, you can't get that math question wrong on the test. If you write down an answer is 64 and the answer is 4,200, you don't get a pass on it.
Right, exactly. So
that's an F. Because Trump said Trump gave himself an A grade.
He did.
On how Puerto Rico is being handled.
Yes, especially since they wanted everything done themselves. For them. They want everything done for them. So
Hey.
we have to talk about that. But it begs a lot of obvious questions. It's just about, do Puerto Rican lives matter?
No.
Are they American citizens? Exactly. So do we need to make them a state? Like what
Yes.
how can we do, what can we do to better protect Puerto Rico?
Here's the question. Before you even get to Puerto Rican statehood, what motivation do the citizens of Puerto Rico have when they are hit by one of the worst natural disasters in recent history? What reason do they have? What motivation do they have to remain a territory of the United States?
Exactly. So we're going to break that down. We'd love some commentary. If you are from Puerto Rico, you have family there, you definitely, if you want to participate today, we definitely would love to hear from you on Facebook Live. So, and you can even feel free to go the old fashioned way and give us a phone call at 708-223-8953. We'd even take your calls on air. We definitely want you guys participating today. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we are going to discuss Roseanne Barr being barred from Channel 7 from ABC. We'll be right back. Thanks for listening to Humanity in the Headlines on intellectualradio.com. We are back on Humanity in the Headlines. So, Dave, do you mind setting this up for us? Again, we always want to start with assuming that, our listeners are very busy folk, working, putting money on the table, don't necessarily have the time to get involved in this stuff the way we do. So let's, for anyone that just may not be fully aware of the details, let's kind of catch them up a little bit, if you don't mind.
Roseanne Barr. What's the name of the show? The show is called Roseanne, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I was never really a follower of the show. So ABC approached Roseanne, brought her show back this year. And earlier this week at 2:45 in the morning, that was on, today is Saturday. So this happened on
Tuesday
at 2:45 a.m. I believe she's in California. So that was Pacific Standard Time. She posts a tweet and says the Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes had a baby equals VJ. The initials VJ standing for Valerie Jarrett, who used to work in the Obama administration. So I won't bother getting into the backstory because people have even tried to figure out exactly what triggered Roseanne in even making that tweet. However, she did make a tweet about Susan Rice, who also worked in the Obama administration. Both of these women, African-American women. And this goes back a couple of years. So she 2013. And she accused Susan Rice of having big ape gorilla arms. Something like that she tweeted.
Not gorilla arms. She said she had gorilla balls.
Okay.
I'll pull it up.
Gorilla balls.
We'll come back to it.
Gorilla testicles, gorilla arms. Compared her to a gorilla. So this tweet that Roseanne put out earlier this week was not the first offense that she had making animalistic comparisons between African Americans and animals. So this happened at 2:45 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and there was a huge backlash against her on Twitter. And a bunch of people were on Twitter and they were demanding that ABC take some immediate action against her. For those of you who don't know, ABC on their entertainment side, their present CEO is an African American woman. So within a few hours, ABC announced via Twitter that they were canceling the show. They put out a statement that her tweet was egregious, it was racist, it was unforgivable. So by noon of that same day, the show was canceled, and Roseanne and the over 100 people, including actors and people who work on the show, were all out of a job as well. What makes this story particularly interesting is that initially Roseanne, her tweet was, "I'm sorry, I don't know what I said," or I apologize, I went over the line, it was a bad joke, and I'm leaving Twitter, goodbye. And then less than a few hours later, she was back on Twitter. As a matter of fact, if you go on Twitter right now, her Twitter account is still up, because since then she has tweeted, "Well, I'm sorry, it was a bad joke. I mean, I was on Ambien. I was on Ambien. That's why I did it." And then she started retweeting all of these other people who were trying to make excuses for her and saying that it was a First Amendment violation by ABC canceling her show because of what she tweeted. So that's basically the story of what transpired, and that kind of brings us up to today, not including the Samantha Bee, but we'll stay with Roseanne right now.
So that's basically what happened and how we got to this point, right? And I always like to talk about initial reactions, like what happened in the moment. So when I first saw the story break and I read what she had tweeted, my first thought was, why is she talking about Valerie Jarrett a year and a half into the Trump administration? I thought that, and I think that's what made, I think people could have maybe cut her a little bit of slack if she would have said this 3 years ago during the Obama administration, when there was, I'm like, well, when was the last time Valerie Jarrett was in a headline? To me, so it looked like she went out of her way to talk about a black, you know what I'm saying? Like, and there was, Valerie Jarrett wasn't trending in the news. She had not said anything. She was minding her own business. So what made her bring up the Muslim Brotherhood? And that's, again, racism will make you do unhinged things like that. So that was my first thought. I just could not understand why she said that. Again, about that particular person when she said it. So all of that seemed very weird to me. And especially for her to then tweet it at 2:00. Like, why are you thinking about Valerie Jarrett? Why does she have you up at night?
You are sitting up at 2. Roseanne is a decamillionaire.
Right.
She has a show that was brought back when Roseanne, actually, from the money that she made from her career before her show came back, she actually owns a macadamia nut farm in Hawaii.
Wow.
So they did a show about that. So this woman is not hurting financially. To your point, she gets her show back on. She's sitting at home. It's 2:45 a.m.
Right.
So, and like you're saying, what preceded 2:45? What conversation was she having? What was she reading? What was she watching? But she was sitting there and she was like, you know what? Somebody need to put DJ in her place. I know what I'll do. I'll tweet.
Right.
Oh, Muslim Brotherhood.
Right.
Planet of the Apes looking. Oh, wait, that's a great tweet.
Yeah, I did not understand it. And then, so with all of that said, I was happy with ABC's response.
I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
I was aghast. I would never have thought that ABC would have responded as quickly as they did.
Let's put some substance to that. So here they say the show brought in an estimated $45 million. This is according to the New York Times. The show brought in an estimated $45 million in advertising revenue for ABC this year, and would have collected more than $60 million next season, according to Kantar Media. So again, that's a lot of money. You're talking about over $100 million for a 30-minute show, 26 episodes between the two seasons. So again, for them to make that move, but again, ABC is owned by Disney. They can afford it. Also putting it into perspective, they're owned by Disney. They're not hurting. I mean, this show was a big deal for them because they had not had a number one show in over like 15 years. So this was a big deal for them, and it's unfortunate. My heart does go out to some of the people she worked with that were on the show. It's a shame. I mean, in particular, the people that played her kids, like, John Goodman has gotten work since Roseanne. But the one daughter in particular, she probably still had her costume on when they called. Hey, you want to so this is
a coincidence,
right?
I was sitting here.
This is a big deal for them. So that's.
I don't feel sorry for them.
That's fine. I'm just saying I do.
I don't feel sorry. I don't feel sorry for them, because if you are hanging around people who if I there's some people so I could go to a bad part of town and go hanging around some people that are doing some illegal things. I know that part of town if I wanted to get into something. And if I go to hang out on the wrong side of town with some unsavory people, I can't get mad when they get arrested and then I'm sitting there too in the back of the police car or the paddy wagon. I can't ask myself, how did this happen?
So with where you're going with that, then that immediately begs a question. What do you think about Wanda Sykes' involvement? Because I didn't know that she was producing the show.
Nor did I. Again, but Wanda Sykes immediately came out after she saw that tweet from Roseanne Barr and said on Twitter, "I will not be returning to the Roseanne show." As a matter of fact, Roseanne, in the subsequent days after her firing, blamed or attributed the fact that the show was canceled to Wanda Sykes coming out and making that statement so quickly. And so she was blaming Wanda Sykes tweeting that she was leaving the show as ultimately why, or one of the reasons why, ABC wouldn't let her apologize. So Wanda Sykes, she's a producer on the show. A producer is arm's length from the show. She's not, she wasn't writing. She wasn't sitting on the set. She wasn't hanging out with Roseanne brainstorming about stories, for the next.
I think she was kind of advising the show because she's a comedian. So I'm sure in some capacity she had something to do with the content, just trying to make sure that the show was still funny.
But to my point, the way that even if she was involved in the content creation, she wasn't a writer, so she wasn't. Again, those people don't necessarily cross paths. She was ultimately the person who was, put in the check mark by the script or saying change this line or change this word or something like that. But again, she immediately came out and when Roseanne made that statement and immediately disassociated herself from the show, probably that probably impacted her financially or economically for her to make that decision. But the fact that she came out and it wasn't let's hear both sides or, both sides do it or none of that.
She was unequivocal.
She immediately made that decision. ABC followed up. Kudos to them.
So we get to the fallout, right? And to your point, we get a lot of the blame game. Roseanne is blaming Ambien. She said I was Ambien tweeting. It was 2 a.m. It was Memorial Day. What was I thinking? But it's so funny because the first thing I think of, again, you and I have had these conversations with people on the right. They will admonish the black community en masse about not taking responsibility. And here, Roseanne who was trying to really do it for a second, has now done a complete 180 and is not taking any responsibility at all. And that just happens so frequently. So then you get into the blame game. And I just really enjoyed, especially like Wednesday and Thursday, once the show got canceled, I just enjoyed just looking at all these tiers of everyone talking about First Amendment right violations and, just basically painting her out to be the victim. So my question is to those people, I'm just trying to keep the rules straight. I thought the rule was, first of all, she shouldn't be talking about politics because she's a comedian. So, because, they told LeBron and then Dwayne Wade to shut up and dribble. So that's the first thing I thought was, okay. So now she can talk about politics. So, okay, we got that. So I'm confused, but okay, I got you. The other thing was, they also told the NFL players there's a time and a place for everything. So, I mean, I guess she was tweeting on her own time, technically at 2:45 in the morning. But once again, she is attached to a major show. Like, I just find it strange how, I guess she wasn't quiet before. I guess she's been doing this for a while, but it just seems like she picked up steam with this tweeting after her show came on, which I would have thought she would have been, I thought she would have faded to black a little bit more. But that was something else that I thought was strange. And then they also said to the NFL players, hey, what are you guys complaining about? You're millionaires. To your earlier point, she is a millionaire at least 10 times over. So what is she complaining about? What is the problem? But I just found it so funny that everything they attributed to NFL players and athletes, basically just trying to get them to shut the hell up. Now all that stuff doesn't apply to Roseanne. She gets to say what she wants, how she wants. And then when she suffers a consequence, she's a victim.
The most important, the most important part of this story, and again, I hate to, there are a lot of people who have tried to encapsulate this moment, and they've used the template of Donald Trump and how he has emboldened so many people to come out and say and do things that they otherwise would not have done and said. But it's important to make this distinction, and I made sure that I emailed this to myself because I wanted to make sure that I got this right. Again, the First Amendment says that no law, the Congress shall make no law abridging the right of freedom of religion and the exercise thereof, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, and to redress grievances against or to petition their government for redress of grievances. So the Constitution is very specific that your First Amendment right being abridged the only person or the only entity, it's codified in law that the government, that Congress cannot make a law abridging your speech. So when Roseanne goes out and tweets, and then ABC makes a business decision that they want to dissociate themselves from her and her racist tweet because they believe that is antithetical to their brand, that's not a First Amendment. That's not a First Amendment. They haven't attacked her First Amendment right, because the Constitution says that the only way that your First Amendment, you are protected from the government abridging your speech. But then the Samantha Bee case, because she came out and she did a little skit about Ivanka Trump and her posting something on Instagram, posing with her baby or something, and she called Ivanka Trump "See you next Tuesday." So that's "See you next Tuesday." That's an abbreviation for a word that starts with C and ends in, and it sounds like it rhymes with hunt. So Samantha Huckabee Sanders comes out and says she said this, or she read this statement: "The language used by Samantha Bee last night is vile and vicious." Sanders said in a statement Thursday, she also called on Time Warner and TBS executives to, quote, demonstrate that Bee's language would not be condoned. Bee's show, quote, Full Frontal, is broadcast on TBS, which is owned by Time Warner. And then she followed up by saying, the collective silence by the left and its media allies are appalling. Her disgusting comments and show are not fit for broadcast. When Sarah Huckabee Sanders stands up as the press secretary to the President of the United States, and in her capacity as a government employee, makes a statement that is basically tacitly directing a private entity to fire someone because of their speech, that is a First Amendment violation. So I just want to make sure that we're making that distinction, that you have the right, Roseanne Barr and anybody else, you have the First Amendment right to say or tweet whatever it is that you want to say and tweet.
She can go ahead and tweet it again right now if she likes.
That does not mean you do not have a First Amendment right that insulates you from the repercussions of your speech. And unfortunately, that's the hypocrisy on the right, that they were saying that, oh, this is only happening to Roseanne Barr because she's a conservative. No, and again, even when they say that, and I heard somebody say this on one of these reports or one of these newscasts earlier this week, and they said it so brilliantly. If you say to Roseanne, or if you say about Roseanne that she's only being attacked because she's a conservative, you are by extension saying that the racist tweet that she tweeted is somehow synonymous with conservatism.
Right.
So they don't. So while conservatives are out here making this, and they might know it, but while they're out here making this argument and trying to hide behind the First Amendment to protect Roseanne, they are actually inadvertently commingling their ideology with the racism that was espoused in her tweet that she said, hey, it was Ambien. Don't blame me.
Right.
It was Ambien.
And she also claimed that she didn't know Susan Rice. I mean, not Susan, Valerie Jarrett was black.
Yeah, she thought that, because some people said she's not even black. She's Iranian because she's fair skinned. Right. Just so everybody out there knows that that black people come in a range of colors.
Well, I think the confusion with that is, while she was born to two African American parents, I think she was born out of the country.
My point is simply that we need to on the left we need to have the same sort of unrelenting interlocked movement on the left, because I hear so many people on the left saying, well, both sides do it. Yeah, we do it on the left too. We got to, because again, people on the right, they don't care.
They absolutely do not care. So to your point, you and I talked about this before, but every time that individuals on the right, because Samantha Bee made her comment and then they went, ha, we got you. So they thought they had this moment of, moral hierarchy. And every time that they do this, Trump comes to undercut it, whether he does it with his current statements or his past. In this case, it's his past. So we were able to look at a Trump tweet, which, again, there's a Trump tweet for everything. I think that's literally what I posted on Facebook. And it was real. He was talking to Mark McGrath for whatever the reason. I don't know the context of their argument. But he said to him on Twitter, "You have a cunty demeanor." True! Exclamation point. So while they're talking, like, again, how do you admonish Samantha Bee when the president of the United States has used the exact same language?
Not to mention that during Trump's during the campaign, it's well documented that there were scores of hundreds of Trump supporters wearing shirts calling Hillary Clinton a cunt.
Absolutely.
There was no one from the Trump administration saying, "Hey, whoa, now that's going too far. We can have our disagreements with Hillary Clinton, but there's no need to get to that level."
Right.
We want to have a campaign that's above board. And here's the other distinction. When Samantha Bee made that statement and she called Ivanka Trump, I always have to catch myself because I have to remember if it's Ivana or Ivanka.
Right. There's both.
Right. Ivana is a mother.
Ivana's a mother.
Right. I know. Okay. So we have to make this distinction. When Samantha Bee made that statement and called Ivanka Trump a cunt, she was speaking from her frustration in the moment about the hypocrisy of Ivanka Trump, that you are posting this picture with your son or your kid on Instagram, and you are celebrating the moment. You are celebrating this intimacy this maternal intimacy that you share with your child. But she's posting that picture while we are actively arguing about mothers being ripped from their children coming across the southern border.
And Ivanka Trump was supposed to be, her part in the administration was supposed to be about women's empowerment.
Exactly. So Samantha Bee calling Ivanka Trump a cunt was a momentary frustration, and that's it. But when you start talking about when you start talking about Roseanne Barr making that post about Valerie Jarrett and saying that she that she looks like the product of that looks like the Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes had a kid. You people have to realize, and a gentleman, what is his name? His name escapes me right now, but Charles Blow articulated it perfectly. In the history of this country, there was a part of the scientific community before the Human Genome Project that they were espousing a scientific ideology that African Americans were a subspecies of human, and they used that ideology to justify their mistreatment and enslavement of African Americans. They said, "Hey, we're not even human. We're closer to."
I mean, that was in the Constitution.
Well, right. 3/5. When we were 3/5 of a person, but I'm talking about the scientific community espoused the belief that we were closer to beast than human being. Fast forward to the 1980s when the Human Genome Project first came out. Again, you had scientists who were using the first study of the human genome, and they were looking at the subtle differences between the DNA of African American or black people and white people, and they were saying, "See, this genetic marker proves that black people are a different species." So throughout recent history in the last 400 to 500 years, the scientific community has over and over again, with whatever scientific evidence they had access to in that moment, have espoused the idea that African Americans are genetically we are less than white people because of the color of our skin. So that's the context. That gives you the context of the power of what Roseanne said. She didn't just say that in a bubble. That's something that white people have been saying about, some white people have been saying about black people for hundreds of years. So for the right to come out and say that Samantha Bee in a moment of frustration calling Ivanka Trump a cunt and equating that to something that has been borderline codified within certain segments of the scientific community about African Americans for hundreds of years, those are not even comparable. And we on the left, we cannot allow the right to keep dictating the narrative. Those two are not the same thing. Ivanka Trump, whatever your opinion of her calling her a cunt is a snapshot in time. It's a picture. When you talk about black people being the product of monkeys, that is a movie. That's something that's been going on for hundreds of years, and we cannot continue to allow the right to conflate these then try to create this moral relativism between when two people speak and one person says something that's impolitic and someone else says something that's racist.
I would agree wholeheartedly. They try to describe. I've seen black people try to describe Roseanne Barr's comments as in poor taste, as opposed to being racist. And you are 100% right in that regard. I wasn't crazy about the Samantha Bee comment, only because, I mean, just taking Roseanne out of it, any of that out of it, I honestly thought it'd be an FCC violation. Because she said it on air. Like I didn't
beeped it.
Yeah,
they bleeped it.
Yeah, okay.
Beeped it or bleeped it or whatever.
Right. So again, I'm like, you can say that on tele. Like I was clutching my pearls. Like I didn't know you could say that word on TV. It caught me off guard, kind of like American Dad does every now and again. Like, oh, you can. Oh, that's where we're at now. Okay, I guess it's 2018. So with that said, I still wish she had not said it. Because I do believe she could have made the exact same point, and the point, it's the substance of the point would have gotten further, in my opinion, without the language, especially at the timing of it, given what Roseanne had just said. But at the same time, I agree with you. It's not the same. It's not equal. By no stretch of the imagination should Samantha Bee be fired. And I think all of us can hopefully learn. What do you think then everyone should learn from this?
Unfortunately, here's the lesson that is reinforced over and over again, and this is just another reminder of that rule. There are two sets of rules in our society. It is okay, it is permissible. I mean, again, let's let's boil this down, and I want to make a hyperbolic statement to try and make a larger point. We don't hold police officers accountable for murdering black people. We don't hold our justice system responsible for imprisoning black people for X amount of time and imprisoning a non-black person who commits the same offense for a half or a third or a quarter % of that time. We have our society, strewn throughout our society are these examples of two sets of rules depending upon who is the administrator of justice and who is the recipient of that justice. So the thing that we need to learn, or the thing that we need to understand, is that we tell ourselves all the time, people, you hear people on the right say all the time that the election of Barack Obama is evidence that we live in a post-racial society. I would go so far as to say that if ABC did not have an African American CEO, and more specifically an African American female CEO, the Roseanne Show would still be on right now. They would have admonished her. They would have perhaps made her go around the country and make some appearances and blah, blah, blah. But the lesson that we need to learn as African Americans is that we are not going to change things by protesting and praying and having die-ins and sit-ins and tweeting and posting stuff on Facebook and getting GoFundMe. None of that is going to change this situation. What changed this situation when Roseanne Barr made that racist statement, the only thing that was a direct result of the outcome was that a person who belonged to the same group that Roseanne Barr offended was in a position of power to hold her accountable. That's the lesson here. Anything else, any and everything else that we have tried doesn't mean anything. Nobody cares about you protesting. Nobody cares about you going to your church. Nobody cares about any of that stuff. We have to, as African Americans, do our level best to get ourselves in positions of power so that we can be the decision makers when these types of offenses happen against us, that we can be the decision makers to hold people accountable, because this society has shown us that no one else cares enough to hold their own accountable. So we have to do it, but we have to do it from a position of power. That's the lesson, I believe.
We're going to have to leave it there, and that's great, cogent advice, Dave. Great job. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to discuss Puerto Rico and the travesty that pretty much has happened there that we have to do better with as a nation. So we'll be right back on Humanity in the Headlines on intellectualradio.com. We are back on Humanity in the Headlines. So, Dave, I'm going to go ahead and set this one up if you don't mind.
Please.
This one's kind of near and dear to my heart. Once I saw this roll out earlier this week, I knew we had to talk about it and give it some time. And I've been disappointed in the very least at the coverage that it's gotten this week, and especially in light of the Roseanne and Samantha Bee situation. It's a shame that the lives of 4,600 American citizens are less important than Roseanne Barr's feelings. So with that said, let's talk about it. We all know that there was a hurricane that came through last year that basically decimated and destroyed Puerto Rico. It was a bad hurricane season in 2017. We had two that hit the mainland. what was it, Florida and Texas.
Correct.
Both caused great deals of damage. But global warming's fake, phony, whatever. This is a progressive show, so I gotta get that jab in too. And with that said, so we had these 500-year hurricanes that hit, and at the end of it, Puerto Rico, which is an island about 90 miles from Florida.
No, that's Cuba. It's Cuba. A few hundred miles.
It's a few hundred.
Yes.
Is that far?
Yes.
Okay. So, but nonetheless, it is in American territory, and the death total was 64. That's what the Trump administration had put out. The government put out 64 deaths. Harvard does a study 9 months later, and granted, it wasn't just like 64 deaths or the number of deaths I'm about to give you. It wasn't just in the storm. It was subsequent to all the things that have happened from the storm, and then continued deaths from that. So the number is up to 4,625 deaths. So, again, to your point earlier, that's 70 times more than what was initially reported. So let's just talk a little bit about Puerto Rico as to what it is, because some people don't know. We don't talk about Puerto Rico much. Puerto Ricans by birth have American citizenship. They can move freely between the island and the U.S. mainland, but unlike Hawaii, Puerto Rico is not a state. That means it does not have voting power in Congress, and its citizens can't vote for the U.S. president, but they can vote in party primaries. So they could vote for Hillary or Bernie, but they couldn't vote for Hillary versus Trump. Their votes did not count for that. So that's just something you might want to put in your back pocket about them. A little bit more information about them. Hold on one second. I lost my. There we go. Nearly half of Americans don't know that Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. They are, and they have been since 1917. As residents of a U.S. Commonwealth, Puerto Ricans have U.S. passports, again, can travel freely throughout the country, and they can serve in the military, and they do in great numbers. But that doesn't mean they get the same rights and benefits as U.S. citizens stateside. Most notably, Puerto Ricans, despite paying most federal taxes, don't have federal representation in Congress. This means they can't vote on issues that affect the island's development, such as Medicaid, food stamps, or even their political future. So I just wanted to paint that picture. These are people that, this is like kind of a little bit worse than a step kid, right? Like, you got the last name, but do you get any of the inheritance?
Right. Okay, you got me. I was just about to say it.
So, Puerto Rico is like United States stepchild. With that said, they were pretty much treated like stepchildren in the way that the Trump administration and FEMA handled the aftermath of the storm. 4,625 people. So a lot of those people died really because of, and I'm going to tell you, this is also why it's so sensitive to me. A lot of those people died because of a lack of power. I'm on, and there's still 10,000 residents.
And when you say power, you mean electricity.
Electricity,
right.
Literal, right, power. So I'm on dialysis. I've been on dialysis now for 9 years. And I can tell you, and I go to dialysis like 4:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. With that said, I do it all year round. Some days I go to dialysis, it's pouring raining. Some days I go to dialysis, there's a foot of snow outside. And a lot of us have the luxury of being able to call our employers and say, hey, can't make it today. Have you seen outside? Guess what? Employees never get to say that. The technicians at these dialysis centers. And we know that also from hospitals and so forth, emergency room doctors. So these are people that rain, sleet, or snow, they are there. And not only are they there, they're there at 3 o'clock in the morning because they have to be there an hour and a half before the patients come, because there are things that they have to do to prep to be able to take care of the patients, machines they have to start, certain things that they have to do. It doesn't matter that it's a foot of snow outside. They have to make the adjustments they need to make in their lives to be there. So with that said, if the consequence is, if they're not there, people could die. And here, I couldn't imagine being in Puerto Rico and I need dialysis, and everywhere around me for hundreds of miles is without power. power to run the dialysis machine. And now here I am a week without dialysis. 10 days without dialysis. That is a death warrant. And that's how a lot of these people died, not just specifically from dialysis, but from whatever treatable medical attention they needed that they couldn't get because we don't have an infrastructure plan in Puerto Rico, an American territory, such that 4,600 people didn't have to die from a freaking storm. So for me, that's why I take it so personal. And that's why it's so unacceptable, because this should not be happening in part of the richest country in the world.
And to your point, when you start talking about the lack of electricity, you're talking about when you don't have electricity, you don't have refrigeration. So when you don't have refrigeration, again, people who need to take insulin, that insulin needs to be refrigerated. You don't have electricity, you don't have refrigeration, your insulin goes bad eventually, and you're going to die pretty quickly if you need to take insulin. Just being able to, a lot of the reports that came from the Harvard study were that people died from not being able to get on dialysis, not being able to keep their insulin refrigerated. Some people just die from older people were just dying from heat exposure. Puerto Rico is in the Caribbean. It gets pretty hot there. And as an extension of this story, and this is anecdotal, and I'm still trying to research this to get the numbers, but you keep hearing the excuse that you kept hearing from the Trump administration was, well, Puerto Rico is in the middle of the ocean. Logistically, I mean, we can drive a truck to Florida, we can drive a truck to Texas, or we can take, a train can go there or whatever, but Puerto Rico is an island. It's in the middle of it's in the middle of the Caribbean, it's in the middle of the water. Right? You can't just drive there. But the reason why you know that there has to be some difference in how Puerto Rico was treated is that we have 3 other U.S. territories that are less than a few hundred miles east of Puerto Rico: St. John, St. Croix, and St. Thomas. St. John and St. Croix were equally decimated just as badly as Puerto Rico was. You don't hear anything about you don't hear those countries having nearly the problems that Puerto Rico has had. Now, granted, Puerto Rico has a larger population on that island
and had a weaker infrastructure before the storm.
Correct. However, if your answer to the issue of being able to help Puerto Rico is simply an issue or a function of logistics because it's an island, then I would have to believe that you're going to have the same difficulties with St. Thomas, St. Croix, and St. John. But those three territories are for the most part populated by people who went there from the mainland, and they typically are more economically affluent, as opposed to Puerto Rico, where other than St. John and Condado and a couple of other Rincon and a couple of the larger cities that are on the island that are tourist locations. The rest of the island is for the most part is pretty poor, and that's what we're talking about at the end of the day. We're talking about the United States making one could make the supposition that Puerto Rico was not given the same level of attention because the majority of the residents are poor. And by extension, like as evidenced by the statistics that you just read a moment ago, most Americans don't even know Puerto Rico is a territory. I would go so far as to say Trump didn't know that. I'm sure Trump didn't know that Puerto Rico was a territory. Well, or what a territory even means and what that entails. I'm sure he didn't know.
Well, let me give you some context. Let's give our listeners here a little bit of context. And this is from a piece in Politico that kind of dissects the difference between the Trump administration's response to Harvey, which hit Texas, and the storm that hit Puerto Rico. It says within 6 days of Hurricane Harvey, U.S. Northern Command had deployed 73 helicopters over Houston. 6 days, which are critical for saving victims and delivering emergency supplies. It took 3 weeks after Maria before it had more than 70 helicopters flying above Puerto Rico. 9 days after the respective hurricanes, FEMA had approved 141.8, so almost $142 million in individual assistance to Harvey victims versus 6.2 million for Maria victims. That wasn't for the state of Texas. That was for Houston, Texas. During the first 9 days after Harvey, FEMA provided 5.1 million meals, 4.5 million liters of water, and over 20,000 tarps to Houston. But in the same period, it delivered just 1.6 million meals, barely a third, 2.8 million liters of water, about a half, and roughly 5,000 tarps, a quarter, to Puerto Rico. So again, there's a substantive, distinct difference in the amount of actual aid, either in amount or in the time that it takes to get that aid to these people between the two responses. Again, no two cities are alike. Yes, they do have some challenges as far as the topography of Puerto Rico, but that's no excuse for what we're seeing. And again, as you and I discussed earlier, this really puts into perspective the already egregious moment of Donald Trump going down there throwing paper towels at people when we thought 64 died. But now we find out 40. Could you imagine somebody at the base of 9/11 when it happened, throwing out paper towels or throwing out tissue for people to cover their face from all the dust? Who's Bush coming down there? Yeah. Oh, you got, what are you breathing that stuff in? Yeah, here you go. Here's a tissue. Come on, dude. Like, it is absolutely insane. And at this point, not only does it solidify the racist nature of this president, but it also confirms that Puerto Rico needs to either be a state or not. But it is a shame for those people there that they have to deal with what they've had to deal with as a part of the United States.
And the point that you just made about 9/11, 9/11 had about 3,000 people who died, and 3,000 people died, and that happened in 2001. It is 2018. It's 17 years later. It'll be the 17th anniversary in this September. We're still fighting a global war against the network that we believe birthed those individuals that flew those planes into those buildings. But we made a 17-year commitment, and we've spent trillions of dollars going around the world finding these terrorists because 3,000 people died. Imagine how much better the infrastructure would be in Puerto Rico if we said, wow, 4,600. We've spent trillions of dollars and gone all around the world for 3,000 people. Now you have more than 4,600 people, and they're saying that they've said in that Harvard study that they can't know what the exact number is. The number could be, right, north of 10,000. It could be even more than that. But certainly it would have taken a fraction of the money that we spent in response to 9/11 to upgrade the infrastructure and to at least have a model, at least be even when you're talking about the response in Puerto Rico, the logistics of Puerto Rico being an island do add another layer of difficulty, but they also add another opportunity because they are an island, and because we have the satellite technology that we have. All you had to do is station ships outside of the storm zone, wait for the storm to pass, and you could have been there immediately. It's not like, we
didn't know it was coming.
Right. It's not like there's a storm coming. Is it from the left or the right or the north or the south? No, we know exactly we know. If you've watched television, they tell you how fast the wind is moving within the cyclone. They tell you how big it is. They tell you how fast it's moving. What category it is. So again, when you see a category 4 or a category 5 storm headed towards an island, all you have to do is say, okay, we know the storm is moving 15 miles an hour. It's 45 miles away from the island. The storm is this big. It's going to make its mainland strike in 3 hours. Then we wait for 6 hours for it to move, for the entire storm cyclone to move out of the danger zone. And then we have access. We can stage ships right here. And as soon as the storm's out of the way, boom, we'll be right there. But that wasn't what they did. They waited until after the storm passed. Then they sent people down to Puerto Rico to assess the damage. And then once those individuals went down there and assessed the damage, then they still, once they assessed the damage, assessed the damage, didn't send a large enough contingent of individuals to service the residents of Puerto Rico. And one can only assume that that is a function of the priority that we give to the people who live on Puerto Rico.
So the only good thing about this, the only silver lining in this, is that because a lot of those people had to be displaced, the most reasonable and easiest place for them to go was Florida. And because they're already U.S. citizens, that means they can vote while they live in Florida. And if any state ever needed to be flipped blue, oh dear God, what is his name? Rick Scott?
Yes.
He has to go. The governor, that's the governor of Florida. So if we can get Rick Scott out of there, if we can get Marco Rubio out of there, if we can flip that state blue, and it's a good chance. I mean, you're probably talking about 50, 60,000 people moving to Florida that weren't there before.
Florida was blue in 2008.
Yeah, it was. So there's a solid chance now that we can get this state to flip. Between that and the school shootings, there's a good chance that we can get Florida to flip blue. So I'd hate to see it happen this way, but if that is the only good thing that comes out of this, then thank goodness for that.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how the state of Florida reacts between now and 18 to disenfranchise those individuals from voting, because they know how they're going to vote.
Right.
We have
to watch that.
No one coming from Puerto Rico to Florida is pro-Trump.
Right.
No one.
Absolutely. So we have to leave it there, good people. We thank you so much for being with us today. We hope we gave you some information that you found useful. And if so, please feel free to share our Facebook Live video today with anyone. I'll be posting the show, the YouTube version of it, to my wall in just a little bit. And we definitely want to thank our producer, Breon Jones. We want to thank Earl Winfrey for intellectualradio.com. And we just want to thank all of our listeners that participated today. We thank you so much for your time. We know you could have been anywhere in the world, but you were here with us. So we thank you so much. Everybody have a blessed and safe weekend, and we'll see you next week on Humanity in the Headlines.